Welcome and hello. This is a video lesson in MODSIM DSS. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about demand nodes, part two, specifically definition types. So what I mean by that is if you go to the general tab for a demand, this is the demand properties window for demand 3, and then demand definition types right here, time series, watch links, and exchange credits. So these are the three different types we're going to describe in this lesson. If you haven't already watched part one, demand nodes, part one that's associated with the general tab, that's the tab we're on here. So if you're brand new to demand nodes, that would be a good place to start as well. I'll leave a link to that lesson in the description of this video, and let's go ahead and get started. So to open up the properties window for a demand node or really any node, just go ahead and right click and then click on properties. The default definition type is time series. In fact, it even opened up two time series for me, this time series tab, but that's controlled from the general tab because time series is selected right here. So we're going to go ahead and start with this one, but I also wanted to point out, if you change the definition type to say watch links, then boom, the time series tab disappears, the watch link tab appears, and it also was automatically selected. So just don't get lost if the tabs switch on you. And then finally, the last one is exchange credit. There's no new tab for that, but there is an exchange credit drop down right here, which we'll talk about towards the end of this video. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to select time series. And what we're doing here is we're defining the time series associated with the demand at this selected demand node, demand 3. I should probably also mention that we have consumptive demand. We also have flow through demand. And with each of these types of demands, they share the same demand definitions here on the general tab. So even though this is a flow through demand, we still have time series, watch links, and exchange credit. So nothing new there. Okay, let's go ahead and delete that one though. Okay, I need to close all my dialog boxes before I can delete anything. So let's give that a try. Okay, there we go. I'm going to reopen up the demand 3 property box. All right, so what I have currently defined is just 10 units. The units are in acre feet per month, and that's going to be year round, every year. So that's how you define the demand. You can simply type it in, you can paste it in, copy paste, or you can import your time series data. So this is true for demands. It's also true for your inflows in the case of a time series associated with a non-storage node. I actually already covered that in lesson 6. So I'll leave a link to that as well. It's titled Importing Background Images and Time Series Data. So yeah, check the description if you want to check out lesson 6. It should be in this playlist anyway. But if I wanted to create a change in the demand besides 10, I could say 5, and then I can arrow down to create a new row in this table. We'll say the next month is 6 acre feet per month, and then maybe the next month is 6.5. So we can go ahead and just type in the demand data month after month. The time series doesn't have to be discretized by month. That just happens to be the default here. But instead of January 1, February 1, March 1, we could just say this is maybe March 15th. So I'm just selecting the day. I'm clicking arrow up. I believe you can also just type. Yep, there's 20. Yeah, you can also change the time of day as well. If this was going to be the same year after year, we'll leave this varies by year checkbox unchecked, which is what it is already. But if we wanted to change the demand time series dataset every year, we go ahead and check that checkbox. It's going to ask us if we want to delete the existing data. We kind of have to say yes there. And then now what we see is the year has been added to this date time column. So now it would start at the beginning of the simulation or earlier. You can have data that starts before the actual simulation. Then you'd go ahead and type in your data here and then just whatever the numbers are. So these are our numbers. Let's go ahead and mix it up. We can also click on the plot. And what we're seeing here is 10 acre feet per month goes up to 12, 11, and then 15. And then it just stays that way for the rest of the simulation. The duration of that simulation is controlled if you go up to MODSIM and then network settings. And then in the tab time step right here, we have the start and end date for the data and then the start and end date for the simulation. So you can go ahead and change that, the start or the end date and time, as well as the time step itself from this drop down. So it could be a month, it could be an hour, a day, a week, and then you can also go user defined. So if your selection isn't predefined, you can do a user defined and then specify the number and the units for your time step. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at 1 month. So I'm going to close this dialog box without saving. And let's open up the properties box once again. I can also change the units. So say for instance, we have our units in cubic feet per second. We can just boom, change it to that. And then the flow rate numbers here would now be cubic feet per second. However, if we look at the plot, it's going to convert to acre feet per month. I'm just going to go ahead and delete these rows. So if you select a row and then delete it, that should be good. And then if I click on plot, what we're seeing here is the demand at that node 3 for every month of the year. And the reason why it's not looking constant in this plot is simply because there's a different number of days in each month. I can also click on the bar plot right here, and you can see it's oscillating up at 31 day months, down at February, which has 29 days in 1980. And then these 4 months here, April, June, September, and November, have 30 days. That's true every year. Okay. So that's what's happening there. I'm going to go back to data and then switch this back to acre feet per month. There we go. And then click apply to save and then click OK. So that's how we assign the demand at a node manually. I still need to talk about how to do this by pasting in the data and importing it. So say, for instance, you have some Excel data right here. I've got my date time. I've got my demand. This is demand 1. Let's just call this demand 3, though, instead. So if I wanted to paste these numbers in, I would just go ahead and grab them here, Control C to copy to my clipboard. Then I'm going to come over here and then right click and let's see, paste rows. Okay, that looks good. It seemed to work. It just goes from 5, 6, 7, 6, 5. So let's click apply and then just take a look at the plot. Okay, yeah, so that looks good, just as we expect it to be. Okay, let's do the last option now and import this data. So I'm going to delete these rows. Okay, I set it back to a constant of 10. Let's go back to Excel now, and then let's swap out demand 2 and demand 3. So now I'll call this column 3, demand 3. So I'm going to import these numbers now using the import tool that's built into MODSIM into my demand for node 3, my demand 3 node, which is right here. So I'm going to just click apply, click OK, close that dialog box. The way to do this is you go up to File, and then Import, and then Time Series. Now what I want to do is navigate to the Excel file. Okay, here is my Excel file just called data.xlsx. All right, and then this dialog box walks through which elements you're dealing with. So I want to select demand 3, and then up here for nodes time series, you need to select the type of node, and that should be demand. So there's demand. And then further down, we have our units. So this is going to be, yeah, acre feet per month. That's fine. And then the worksheet name. So in this Excel file, I've got 3 worksheets. I've got data, sheet 1, and sheet 2. Sheet 1 and sheet 2 are just blank, but data is the worksheet that I want to select. So MODSIM is looking into this Excel file and parsing out, searching for the actual data. All I have to do is make sure to make the correct selections here. So I'll click data. And then I've always selected use entire worksheet. So that's worked for me. Let's just go with that. Start date column. This is going to be the column right here, column 1 that says date time, that's where I have the date time data. And then the next drop down here, I'm going to be searching for demand 3, which is going to be the demand 3 data. All right. So as I said, for start date column, we're going to use this use date time column. And then the actual data column is going to be use demand 3 column. Okay, so let's click OK and then see if that works. So the dialog box closed there. So right click properties and boom, here are the numbers 2, 3, 8, 4, 2. That's what we put in for that column 3 data, which is right here. All right, back to MODSIM here. I'm going to click on the General tab. We've covered the time series definition type. Next up is watch links. So when I selected watch links, we have our watch links tab appeared and selected. MODSIM provides a watch logic calculator for defining more complex conditional relationships where flow requirements at particular locations are based on flow conditions at various links throughout the network. And that's true for each time step in the simulation. What we're seeing here in the top table is watch link factors. We've got 6 separate factors, and the values of those factors are all initialized to 1. And then down below here, we have a table for the watch link lists. where we're actually going to list out different links in the network in this first column. And then the second column, we're going to specify the specific transference type. The user's manual PDF file on page 108 shows what that equation is here. So here it is, D, the demand that we're defining, equals the sum of these 6 terms here. There's a max term, a min term, natural log, base 10 log, exponential, and square term. And then everything down below here is just text. So here's the equation up here. There's also these W terms, these leading coefficients, which serve as weights. So W max, W min, W sub ln, W log, WEXP, and WSQR. Those refer to the weights right here. So initially they're just 0. And if you don't have a specific demand node, that's selected for that transference type, then that entire term just drops off of this equation. But if we don't have any links for any of the transference types, the demand is 0. But once we have links listed in this table, then that calculation can determine what the demand is for that particular demand node at each time period. Okay, so let's do a real simple example here. What I have in my model already is an inflow 1 of 100 acre feet per month. All the units are going to be in acre feet per month. And then I have a demand at demand 1, demand 2, and demand 3 are each 10 acre feet per month. So the flow rate is going to be 100, 90, 80, and then 70. Let's go ahead and run the model real quick just to confirm that. Okay, so say for instance, I'll just check the flow right here by opening up the graph, and it is 80. So yeah, just take my word for it that those are the numbers. So the demand here at demand 3 node, consumptive demand 3 node, is our 10 acre feet per month. But if I switched it over to my watch links and I wanted to set it to how about half of the minimum of this first link right here. So we know this is 100, half of that would be 50. I'm just going to do a real simple example. So I'll change this coefficient from minimum to 0.5. And then down here for watch links, I want to select inflow 1 underscore demand, or whatever this link is called, which that's what it is because I'm just using the default naming for the links. So I'm going to select inflow 1, demand 1, and then the transference type, I need to select minimum, which is right here. Okay, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to click apply. Okay. I'm going to save the changes and then run MODSIM. This is the run confirmation. So, okay. Okay. So that ran. Now we have 100, 90, 80, and then half of 100 is 50. And then subtract 50 from 80. We should have 30 acre feet per month flowing through this downstream link right here. So there's the 30. That's how that works. All right, let's go ahead and add another link to that minimum transference type. Let's add this link right here. So we know this is 100, 90, 80. The minimum between 100, which we'll leave in the group, and 80 is 80. Half of 80 is 40. So 80 minus 40, we should have 40 acre feet per month right here. So let's go ahead and make that change and open up the properties box again. This time I'm going to add demand 2 to demand 3. I'm going to add it to the minimum group, which is right here. Click apply, click OK. Okay, I'm going to save the changes and then run my MODSIM. Okay, and that ran. So let's go ahead and hopefully see 40 as our number for the flow in this link. And yep, there's 40 right there. Okay, a couple things that the user manual informs the user to watch out for is precision. So for instance, if you have the calculations set to 0 right here for precision, by the way, I just went up to the MODSIM menu and then network settings. And then for precision 0, it's going to round all your numbers to the nearest integer. And that may not be precise enough. Also, if the demand equation right here does not calculate the demand you're interested in, MODSIM also allows the user to come up to the MODSIM menu and then custom runs. And then here is a code editor box that allows the user to have more control over what the actual demand is from their demand node. So just wanted to let you know that that's also an option. Okay, back to the demand 3 property menu. I'm going to go to general, and then instead of watch links, last definition type for demand is exchange credit. And we don't have an exchange credit tab, but we do have this drop down right here. This is where we're going to select a node, a different demand node. I'll show you how that works with an example from the user's manual. This is called an exchange credit node. So in this example right here, I'm at the top of page 106. Say, for instance, this reservoir has been in an agreement to serve North Cooter Irrigation consumptive demand node. However, based on the topology and how the network's set up, that this reservoir cannot actually release flow to North Cooter Irrigation, then it's still possible through exchange for the water in this reservoir to effectively serve North Cooter Irrigation by serving some other user like Fort Collins this consumptive demand. And for water that was going to be flowing downstream to satisfy Fort Collins, now it gets diverted to North Cooter. So whatever demand that North Cooter Irrigation consumptive demand node has, that becomes the exchange demand that's assigned to this downstream node. We'll just call it exchange. This exchange node right here would facilitate that exchange process. Diversions to North Cooter Irrigation node are credited to the exchange node and then transferred to Fort Collins. Therefore, the demand at this North Cooter Irrigation effectively become the same demand at this exchange node. So whatever gets diverted here becomes the demand at this exchange node on behalf of that transfer. Okay, let's go ahead and apply that to our own model here. I'm going to add a reservoir, boom, and then let's also add a demand node. How about right there? I'm going to make that connection and then that connection. Okay, I'm going to call this node, how about demand 4? Then let's move the label off to the side. Okay, now for this model, let's pretend that demand 1 way up here, it's sort of upstream of the reservoir. They've come into an agreement. So demand 1 actually has water rights from this reservoir. We'll call it reservoir 1. So what you want to do in that situation is open up the properties table for the consumptive demand node, demand 1, click on general, and then change our type to exchange credit. And then from this drop down right here, we want to select demand 4 right there and apply. All right. So that's how that works. What we talked about in this lesson were the different definition types for demand nodes in MODSIM. We talked about the time series, watch lengths, and exchange credits.